My name is Steve Lyons. I retired from the federal government after 35 years, my last 12 years with USDI. I'm now the Vice President for Intel Programs with with Oracle's National Security. We've got five events this afternoon. We're going to start off with one of the major ones on how from data to AI, how does NGA work with industry to get to the future? The moderator today will be Dr. Anthony Vinci, Chief Technology Officer for NGA. Also on the panel, we've got Matt Bigge, partner of CrossLink Capital, Rich Byrne, Senior Vice President, Center for Programs and Technology with MITRE, David Gauthier, Director, Office of Strategic Operations at NGA, Christy Monaco, Chief Ventures Officer, Office of Ventures and Innovation, also at NGA, Nat Puffer, Senior Vice President, In-Q-Tel, Chad Steelberg, CEO, Veritone. At this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Anthony Vinci.
Thank you for that, and thank you for putting on the panel today. How's the volume? Are we good? Thank you. So I think this is a really important panel. I think everybody listened to not just Robert's speech yesterday, but to essentially every speech that I've seen down there in the main hall, where all of the speakers have pressed on how important artificial intelligence, augmentation, automation technologies are to the intelligence community, to the Department of Defense, and really I would say to everyone in the GEOINT enterprise right now. I think we're all looking at that as a primary issue over the near future. And the most important part of it, and I think you heard this kind of referenced by a few of the speakers, including Sue Gordon this morning, is the implementation, the operationalization of those technologies. Not just doing pilots, but actually getting them integrated into our operations. And so I think the purpose of today's panel is to talk about that issue. How do we actually get there to a future where GEOINT is done using AI, automation, augmentation technologies? How do we get there? And I think we're not going to get there alone. NGA is certainly not going to invent its way out of this issue. We're not going to develop it ourselves. We're going to have to work together with everybody within the GEOINT enterprise, in particular with industry, with academia, the associations out there, with individual inventors and individual experts on the subject. And so the way we're thinking about it in NGA is really a spectrum of activity that's happened. If you want to take kind of the context here a little bit, if you imagine NGA, we began, or our predecessor organizations began in a world of wet film, manual processing of information, and we shifted over time into digitization, the use of software. Most recently, we've shifted into a world of big data and data focus. And I think that NGA, working together with the rest of the NSG, the ASG, and our industry partners, we're doing pretty well there. I think we're there. I think we all know what it's like to do geospatial analysis using data and using big data. But now there's this further leap to make of using artificial intelligence. And so I don't want us to see this shift into AI just being out of nowhere. This is an evolution over time. And over time, we've evolved our partnerships with different organizations to get us there. We didn't just get to the big data GEOINT focus alone either. And we worked with small businesses, big businesses, traditional contractors, non-traditional contractors, FFRDCs, and other more unique offices like In-Q-Tel. That's how we got here in the first place. And I think we're going to have to work with those same organizations in the future to get to that AI-driven world that we all want to get to. So in this panel, we brought together a lot of those partners. And we brought together a CEO of a company that works on artificial intelligence, someone from In-Q-Tel who's bringing those new interesting technologies and companies into the IC and the DoD. Someone from an FFRDC, from MITRE, who's working with the government hand in hand to develop, to test, to assess these technologies with us. So we brought them all together, and including even one layer back from the developers, bring somebody from the venture capital industry in. is we need to think about the investors as well. We need to really expand the tent here. And that was the purpose of the panel. So what we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes or so is that issue. How do we make that shift from thinking in terms of data and doing GEOINT in terms of data to doing GEOINT using artificial intelligence, automation, augmentation technologies? And how is everyone going to play their role, and what are our ideas? What's working, what's not? But again, with the mind of true operationalization and integration. So with that, I'll kind of turn it over to my fellow panelists. We'll all take a couple of minutes to introduce ourselves and get your views, and then have a conversation for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to questions. So thanks again for being here. Appreciate it, and looking forward to the conversation. And we'll just go kind of left to right here.
Great.
Starting with you, Chad.
Thanks, Anthony. Hi, my name's Chad Steelberg. I'm the chairman CEO of Veritone. I think I'm the one operator in the commercial sector on the table. My company I founded 5 years ago. It's my fifth business. It's a leader in artificial intelligence. It built the first operating system for cognitive computing. We essentially saw the world as in AI being very different than classic startups, but rather looked at it more as a community. I think Anthony and I shared that belief when I met him for the first time maybe 18 months ago, was that this problem is not tackleable by a single company being able to develop AI that can develop solutions that can really solve global problems. You have to have a community of AI and a community of data put together, and that's really what Veritone is about. So today we have over 200 companies with different cognitive engines solving different problems around unstructured audio and video-based analysis. So my background is not in GEOINT. It's really about solving problems in the commercial sector, primarily dealing with legal, local law enforcement, public safety, and media companies. But lately, we've been working with the federal government and other local agencies to tackle more security problems, dealing with object identification in video, et cetera. And one of the premises that we have is the fact that, unlike classic computation, artificial intelligence cannot even be achieved without having open data to the developers. And so I think what recently was announced by Anthony and NGA yesterday was this open data framework, which I think is critical to the future of AI and our government.
Can you all hear me? Okay. So I'm Christy Monaco. I'm NGA's Chief Ventures Officer. Thanks for that lead-in, because the GeoWorks platform was launched by the Office of Ventures and Innovation. And that's just one example of the ways that we are attempting to make it easier for to bring AI solutions into the GeoINT space. You know, making our data available on a platform, establishing a number of cooperative R&D agreements with companies to co-develop on some really hard problems. We established an OTA, and other transaction authority. We're working with DIUX to leverage their commercial solutions opening. We're trying to put as many tools out there for solutions like this to be brought into the federal government, because we recognize that the solutions that are being developed by the AI community are more than likely commercial solutions for which there is a government use as well.
Hi, I'm Rich Byrne. I'm a Senior Vice President at the MITRE Corporation, that FFRDC construct that you heard people mention. You know, an FFRDC has been designed over 60 years ago to bring together all the different stakeholders, not just the government, but industry and academia. And over the 60 years, it's served the country well, but a lot of things have changed. Technology has changed, and partnership models have to change. So I'm excited by what Anthony and others are doing at NGA to try to bring us to the next generation of how we're going to partner. There's a lot of different things that we'll need to do, but I just want to touch on one in the opening statement, which is, you know, this battle around the world is going to be done by talent. Now, in the past, when we had the Industrial Revolution, America led the technological advances and the retraining of the workforce and became a dominant power. During the dot-com, same thing. The innovations came from America, and then the workforce led the regeneration of a new set of skills. Well, in this next generation where AI and machine learning, everyone's worried about what's going on, then the US should be leading the technical advances and leading the workforce re-engineering of the people's skills. But I can tell you that that's not going to be as easy as we may think, because there's a lot of competition out there now, and we're going to have to be very aggressive. We have a great innovative culture, but we're not going to be able to do it just by our past merits. So one of the things that I would like to see us think about is how do we infuse this so the next generation of people are not the millennials, they're not the X and Y generation, but we call them the AI generation. That from beginning of school all the way through universities, into public service, into industry, we give them the tools to reinvent themselves to be the data analytics, machine learning leaders of the world. I think GEOINT is a really natural place to start because time and space, as they say, is everyone. Even kids can understand the importance of that. And the GeoWorks platform that we're putting out there is a great opportunity to get people early on to be, retrained so we can go to the next generation.
Or even not just retrained, but trained. I mean, think about using GeoWorks as a platform for recruiting, or we've talked about using it as a means of outreach to organizations like the Boy and Girl Scouts of America.
Perfect.
I am Matt Bigge. I'm a partner at CrossLink Capital. We're a Silicon Valley-based early-stage venture investor, typically at the seed and Series A pre-revenue stages of company formation. I've been investing in startups off and on for, I guess, about 22 years. Actually started my investing career commercializing technology out of large government and defense-related research and development facilities. And what we saw back then was true American leadership in the development of advanced technologies. I am a very big believer that in order for the macroeconomy in this country to work, we have to be leaders. And being leaders also helps our national security strategy. And hopefully, by gaining a better understanding of the tools and technologies that are enabled by applying AI to geospatial awareness, we can get back on the podium and hopefully to the top of the podium. Because I will say right now, from what I see traveling around the world, we are not leaders.
Hi. On that cheery note, I'm Dave Gauthier. I'm the head of strategy at NGA. And I'm going to bring us hopefully back up and talk about why are we talking about artificial intelligence and automation as tools that are so important to our future. One reason is, as we look out to the horizon, we see that data and technology are becoming so ubiquitous and so open that there's no advantage to be gained in those fields anymore. Everyone has the same level of data. Everyone has the same access to technology. So what will give us advantage is how do we be clever and use data and technology to orient our decision makers faster and more precisely to the decisions and actions they need to take. And so with that orientation in mind, NGA has to look inside and say, what tasks are we looking at to employ artificial intelligence on? And I think it's really three things. One, obviously, is productivity. So we can use these tools to make our efforts more productive in the face of larger and larger amounts of data. But number two, it's also complexity. And this is where we have to be clever in that the human mind can't keep more than a few streams of hypotheses going simultaneously, but a machine can keep thousands or millions of those hypotheses going simultaneously and can help us find those complex nuggets that we need to find. And the third thing I want to mention is we use these tools actually to get back to our humanity. And so in an odd way, and maybe a paradoxical way, we look to training machines to be better at our business in order that our humans can get back to what the humans are good at and offload some of those cognitive skills and get back to the real human aspect of intelligence. What keeps me up at night, though, what we're embracing are two factors that are diametrically opposed. We have to be fully open to all these partnerships to bring AI to bear, but we also have to be fully secure in the results that we get, and so that we can always maintain trust in our content. So I'll leave it at that.
Matt Puffer, Senior Vice President for Enterprise Technologies at In-Q-Tel. My practice covers a lot of areas inside of analytics, cybersecurity, and infrastructure. So with that, all of the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the corresponding hardware that goes along with that falls under the group that I lead. For those of you that might not be as familiar with what In-Q-Tel is, that's okay. We kind of like it that way. We like keeping a low profile. We were founded about 20 years ago by CIA to look at the sea change that was occurring with research and development that was moving from a lot of the corporate entities out into the startup community. So we sit somewhere between Matt and the government itself. Originally partnering, again, with primarily CIA, we've extended that out to a number of different agencies in the intelligence community, Department of Defense, national security communities, widely. In this community, I think the most famous thing that we've done so far is an investment in keyhole markup language. That was the creation of KML, which eventually became Google Earth through their acquisition of that company. And that's really what we do all day. We go out and we try to find these innovative startups, these components that can provide a strategic advantage to the missions that everybody in GEOINT is really focused on, and enhance them in some way that make them more accessible to get onto mission faster. That's how we judge ourselves. For the things over the past year that we've been looking at in this area, AI, ML specifically, the first one that sort of gives me pause is the ability to have a consistent conversation with everyone. And what I mean by that is there's been so much hype in the Valley, so much hype with our partners on what AI is and what the promise of AI is, that we found ourselves having to have a sort of regrounding of what the capabilities can do for folks, what the actual needs are, and how we can actually prep different algorithms and capabilities and hardware to get the most strategic advantage for the application that you have at hand. And with that, I think goes a lot of what Dave was saying. What we're providing in most cases is early, raw, but very, very powerful components to enable your particular programs to do the best that they can possibly do. And with that is going to require a lot of understanding of how to bring those things from the low to the high side. So finally, I'd like to reiterate what Chad and Rich were both saying, is that there needs to be an understanding of what the startup communities can create, what the commercial world is creating, and almost have a bias towards as much development as we can have on the unclassified setting to push as much data as possible into that realm. Those are sort of the things I've been focusing on.
So this is a really good set of viewpoints that I think have represented the different players in this space around NGA and around the GEOINT community. I think you heard some interesting insights there. Wanted to dive in a little bit and ask Matt and Chad, kind of coming from that, well, not just Silicon Valley, but California world, truly private, not a lot of work with the government, and in your case, Chad, really almost essentially none. Some context to give about our approach in NGA is, in a way, and I think other government agencies are doing this as well, we're trying to sort of replicate that world a little bit internally. In a sense, In-Q-Tel was a means of doing that with the venture capital world. GeoWorks that we announced yesterday is, in some ways, could be seen as replicating Kaggle, which some people may be familiar with as a data science challenge site. Because these are proven approaches to innovation, creating technology and adopting that technology. And so we're trying to kind of replicate that internally. What other ways, what other things can we replicate that you've seen inside the government or through partners in the government that are going to kind of help this along and to make that transition?
I mean, one thing to start, I know I was a bit abrupt there with my ending. That's the fear, and if we're not constantly paranoid, we will get left behind. There's some Intel guy who said that, not IC Intel, but the other type. But I think it is important to look at things like GeoWorks, and I remember the first time I saw it, my immediate thought was, one of the things that makes government a challenging, if not bad, customer for a startup is government customers want solutions, not products. Because government customers have very specific needs that typically do require a bespoke solution. And startups have to focus their scarce resources on building a product once, selling it many, many times, and then maybe as they get bigger and at larger scale, they can sell to government customers. The thing that impressed me about GeoWorks is by exposing the data sets on that type of a tool, entrepreneurs can go on there, see what are the gaps that an organization like NGA requires filled, and then see the data sets they can use to train their models and iterate. So by the time they come to NGA with a solution, it is in fact a solution. So that should streamline the procurement process to put it on technology company friendly terms, particularly with the use of OTAs along the lines of DIUX procurement and NGA direct procurement. And you're doing it on the unclassified side. I'm sure everybody in this audience has been frustrated many, many times in their lives by, things being on classified networks, despite the fact that they're on the front page of the New York Times. So I think GeoWorks actually takes some really nice steps in that direction. I think beyond that, it's really a matter of continuing the process of engaging, which you do with innovative companies like Chad's.
Hello. So maybe my perspective is a little bit different. Shocker. I've done 22 rounds of venture financing in my career, so I know those bodies well. And one of the things that I'm seeing in our platform play in this business is the following. Right now, we've done zero revenue with the federal government. I have hundreds of companies worldwide that use our platform in the commercial sector, paying us millions of dollars using AI in a practical way with measurable ROI. Yet, knocking on the door of the federal government for 18 months, still zero revenue, zero contracts. We're in 22 RFPs, which I don't even know half the names of the procurement processes that are happening. But I can tell you that my shareholders are not benefiting from any of this effort. And our technology is superior to all the other groups out there. We bid against the Googles, the Amazons of the world, because we're using a Keiretsu approach of using the best engines around the world. And to touch on your shoulders, the best engines of the world are all over the world. They are not located in Silicon Valley. They are located globally. And that's where our technology is coming from that we then orchestrate. So the one thing I'll say, I think it's great. You're starting from data, which is where you are, big data. They're opening that up. But unless you can streamline the process for those innovative companies to take that raw asset, develop those initial models, productize it, but then allow for the monetization to actually occur at the federal government, they are simply going to use your data to build something that then is going to get sold to Google. I was at Google when we actually bought Google Maps. So I know how that process works, and all you're going to do is fund Silicon Valley's next multi-billion-dollar startup, which may or may not help our government, unless you can solve the procurement process end-to-end.
Wish you'd be a little more forward, Chad, and tell us what you really thought.
We're friends, actually.
Can I comment on that? So I do want to say, recognizing that, yes, we do want AI solutions that fit our bespoke needs. But one of the great things about GeoWorks is that I want that to happen. I want to fuel American innovation, whether or not it benefits NGA.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we had a conversation before the panel, and I suggested this to the rest of the panel. This isn't about NGA. It's not just about us producing better technology. It's about the wider GEOINT community. I would say the American and allied GEOINT communities, because it is a competition, and it's come up a couple of times on this panel, and more than a couple of times throughout the conference. And being competitive doesn't necessarily just come down to one or two technologies. It comes down to an entire nation competing. So I'll just turn real quick before we go to questions to the other side of the equation and ask to Nat and to Rich. You're sort of, they're supporting the government. You're in kind of a middle ground where you've partnered with the government in a very specific mandated way, really, that we had to create new laws to actually do that. And I think they're unique ways, and that we've been doing for the case of In-Q-Tel for 20 years now, and for the case of MITRE and FFRDCs for 50, 60 years. As we make this transition, we need clearly new ways to work with industry. How does your role change over time as it relates both to government but also to the industry partners out there?
Yeah, That's a great question, and I think it actually dovetails probably closer into the conversation we were just having than maybe it seems. For us, being able to, the trick behind being able to get the government the max bang for the dollar invested, and actually have the startups be able to focus on what they're doing, because if startups can't focus, they'll crash, is finding those really critical proxy problems and those really critical proxy markets that they can go after. So for security, as an example, startups hate having to add in security to this great thing that they just invented. It is friction in the system. It is the first place that they usually get hit when they try to go through this procurement process. That's why we love the financial services industry, because all of our startups want to sell to Goldman Sachs and Bank of America and everyone else. So we don't tell them that they need to create security that's good enough for the federal government. We tell them, I have worked with Goldman Sachs and Bank of America. I know what their security looks like. Let's get you prepped for that particular acquisition process. Their backers are happier, they're happier, their VCs are happier, everybody's happier in that. And by the way, we just happen to benefit naturally. So finding those synergies is what we end up doing all the time. That's getting a little bit trickier with some of the conversations right now. I've spent 18 months on this, I don't understand. I went into Goldman, 6.5 hours later, I was in their lab. 2.5 months later, I was on their product shelf, right? Like, that's a very fast turnaround. We do have to address that, but I think one of the things we probably can do is start figuring out that gap a little bit better on components and capabilities and those mission, those fully baked mission pieces. That is, I think, where we're struggling right now, because it's scary. Remember, when you're a startup technology, and all of the strategic integrators are wonderful people, but imagine you've just invented this thing that you think is unique in the universe, and you have to trust someone else not only to give it the care and feeding and installation, but do it behind closed doors when you can't even see what they're doing. It's a very scary proposition for these folks. We need to work on that.
Well, I think the FFRDC that we work for the Intel community has been around for 60 years. But since then, MITRE actually has 6 other FFRDCs, and I think it'd be instructive just to learn what other ones that decades later, how did they change their business model? So we have the two latest FFRDCs we created. One was in healthcare for CMS, and one was for NIST and cyber. It's striking to see the way the modern business partnership models are designed compared to the older ones that have been around for decades. They implicitly require us to be a convener of industry, academia, and the government. It is built into the contract that they have to be tightly coupled because they believe that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So maybe the US has the best talent in some area, maybe the US has the most valuable data, but when we're stovepiped, even the individual silos are not going to beat a China with a massive amount of maybe second or third, maybe not even second or third anymore, but they work together. The team synergy is going to overcome the individual silos. So the new FFRC models in cyber say there's no boundary in cyber on organizations. There's no boundary in pandemic healthcare issues for cancer or whatever else we're doing. Those boundaryless models have to be represented in the way we interact with industry. So my plea is that we should be very aggressive and not just saying what made us successful here is what's going to make us successful now, because we see in other areas like cyber and healthcare that they're changing the model so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and we need to do that in GEOINT.
I want to go back and address some of the security questions that were brought up with startup companies, and completely empathize with the startup community and realizing that when they hit some of those security things, it's going to slow them down, and it seems like a burden at the time. But we found with some of the startups that they can be incredibly naive at the threats to their own very business. And they're not really paying attention to the security that they should be paying attention to for their own well-being. And so, and I'm mindful I'm saying this between two folks in the venture capital community. Even the venture capital community can be incredibly naive when it comes to the kind of security and provenance that's necessary for a product to become a service that can be trusted around the world. And that goes to brand identity, and it goes to scale.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that Matt and I would argue with that much.
No, you can't argue with it because it's like just super true.
Right.
I can argue with it.
Because the thing is, no, I mean, if you're building stuff for financial services, I mean, I don't think security is really the main issue, personally.
Wait. How many of you have gone through FedRAMP? You've gone through it.
Yes.
Yeah, I've gone through it.
Yeah. So it's a total pain in the ass.
Might as
and
well
it's
rip
a
off my
horrible
toenails.
tax. Well, and what's worse is it's a tax to some consulting firm who's going to come in, disrupt all your business processes, charge you a ton of money that you don't have spare cash for. And yeah, it's total brain damage, but that's why I don't let my startup sell to the government.
And that's why I waited till we went public to actually go sell to government. So,
Yeah.
so by definition, I just want to make sure we're here on this. By definition, government does not get the latest and greatest technology coming off of the factory line. It waits till the company gets public, has demonstrated its value, and then gets to migrate to U.S. government. But I can tell you, I have the Chinese, I have the Australians, I have the UK, and I have countries around the world licensing technology from us without a FedRAMP certification because they are mission-oriented and want the technology that's best in the market. And that, to me, is where we need to move. Now, I'm not against security. I love security.
Well, but don't
protect
confuse
America.
FedRAMP with security.
That's my point. I like security. I don't
Because it
necessarily
has
like
nothing
FedRAMP.
to do with security.
So,
It's
so
just-
let's
there's a
take
flip side
let's
to
take
this.
FedRAMP off the table and let's talk about how do we have provenance of our algorithms so that we can trust them, right? And
But if we're going to have that conversation, we have to have the very honest flip side of that conversation, which is for foci reasons and NISPOM reasons, I can't engage with many of the technologies that you're talking about. They're too foreign. But if Intel acquires them, you will buy that in a heartbeat because now they have the guise of Americanness put over the top of them. So there's both aspects of this, and I think the rate at which companies get acquired inside of the AI and machine learning space, the fact that we don't produce end-to-end both software and hardware anywhere in the United States, to my knowledge, in this space, all of these things are an open and honest conversation that we have to have on both sides. Because I think the startup community would be willing to take one giant leap forward on the security if you would make one giant concession on the foci pieces.
Well, I think what I'm kind of hearing here, and I've heard this before, is if we're going to talk about a change and a shift from data to AI, and we're going to talk about a change in the way we do business, it means the government's got to change a little bit as well. And we don't. And I'm on the government side now. I think we don't hear that enough. It's always this, oh, well, you guys go change, and you just get used to our acquisition process and learn what OTA stands for or something like that. But we sort of need to change as well, and I think that is part of the evolution. And one of the people who asked a question, they said, actually, this is one of the questions, said, if you could make one change that would enable a bow wave of progress in AI, what would it be? So I'll just do a lightning round here. One sentence. What is it for everybody? Go. I know you have something, Chad.
He's going with you.
I think you already did the first step. I think it's opening up government data and allowing a community to collaborate around developing AI solutions for the U.S. government.
I would look for ways to connect our users with AI developers. Like make sure that we understand each other.
I would move away from the waterfall FAR that takes 10 years to deploy and move to objective technical benchmarks and let the best industry winner get the immediate award for 80% good enough.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Me too, by the way.
Yeah. Actually, I just kind of reiterate what Chad said.
I'll try to add specialization. We're really seeing that a lot of problems are very unique and there's not a great transfer. But if you can apply an AI technique to a problem and specialize on that, you get excellent results. So.
Yeah. And maybe with all of that, would dovetail on something you said earlier, and gaining more comfort in putting resources against side-by-side comparisons of some of these new techniques and capabilities with the existing way of doing things to build up confidence and then be comfortable with letting that go and allowing the algorithms to do their jobs to let you focus on a more interesting problem.
Good answers. Another interesting one that came in here that I hadn't really considered in this light. It's a question: how will NGA or industry ensure that AI-generated insights are not biased by the biases of the designers, of the software developers? And I think for those of us who have touched on the AI industry, we are seeing a lot of concern about this issue. But what's unique about government and industry working together, there are some very specific rules and laws, in fact, for government when it comes to bias. And when it is not quite as open as in commercial, so it's a special case.
Yeah.
And so I'd throw it out there for you guys. How are we going to cooperate on that?
I'll jump on that one first. Okay. So our entire premise was built on that exact foundation, which is, most of you are probably not AI experts, but what happens is the training data set essentially dictates the bias. And each of the models that we've deployed, for example, on Veritone, we have over 100 natural language processing models. And the reason why we need 100 is literally to arbitrate between the bias of the training data sets. And so Conductor is an AI that sits on top of those base level functions that is able to route between them to remove the bias in real time and generate higher results with less bias. So I think, again, the community of AI isn't about necessarily just finding the best price or the cheapest rate, but actually about removing bias from the system that monolithic models produce by having point solutions being orchestrated in real time. So that's a foundation of our company, and I think everyone on this table would agree with that.
I mean, there's just too much opportunity for kind of, I/O in the AI domain otherwise. I mean, you already see it a little bit where folks will try and spoof training data sets to generate false outcomes. And so unless you have nested models, you're never going to get past that.
Well, and I think on the government side, this is where our analysts come into play. They need to sit in that space to take a look at what the AI is generating, the information the AI that's coming out of AI, to say, hey, does this fit? Is this right? Does this make sense?
Yeah, and I think that on top of that, the provenance and pedigree of the data, because ideally you would always want to solve a problem end to end with all at once. That's just not the way data flow works inside of our systems. So being able to understand when the analyst does identify an issue, what the upstream data set was that maybe got into the AI algorithms that they were looking at, and how to root out that bias far away from where they're actually doing the computation.
I'll kind of ask a related question here, in a sense, and kind of in theme with Robert's speech yesterday and the overall theme of the conference. Someone said, how do we maintain critical thinking skills so analysts do not simply default to machine delivery solutions? So this is, I think, a very specific question for the intelligence community, where we have built up 60 years of social science knowledge, and we have the best. This is a truism, I believe. We have the best analysts in the world and knowledge of everything from political theory to geospatial analysis to very, very specific social science issues. And we have traditionally recruited from liberal arts and from history and from political science, international relations like myself. How do we balance that off with AI? Because if we are talking about this shift now, going from data to AI is not just putting another icon on the desktop. This is artificial intelligence. This is augmented intelligence. There is another intelligence here. So how do we do that? And specifically, how do we work with industry to make them understand what we're going to need, which might be a little bit different than what other industrial partners need? And I'd kind of point it towards sort of Rich and to Dave maybe to comment on it.
Well, I think it's really important that today the state of the art for AI is not fire and forget. It's really, we found, and we do probably over 100 different big data analytics, machine learning programs for the government a year. And we find that the critical magic happens when we have really smart domain experts that are humans combined with really smart data science people who are machine learning experts. And it's that combination that's the magic. You try either one by themselves, they will subperform the combination. So I think the first thing we do is we don't try to say one is better than the other. That's a false argument. We say, how do we get the best partnering? And what we found is that the domain experts fall in two categories. If they're not very good, they don't like machine learning because they feel like they're not adding any value. If you're really good in your domain, they love machine learning because they say, oh, it takes all that stuff away from me and I can do the really high-end stuff. So I think that's what we got to focus on and shape the story is not either or, human versus machine, but how do you raise that bar to be the best partnership?
Yeah, and we, to add on to that, we just had a conversation about provenance and bias and manipulation, and I think all of our analysts should be drilled from day one that there are a number of reasons why the machines could be wrong. You always question the machine and provide that additional alternate hypothesis to check the answer and the domain expertise and apply that to what solutions and answers and insights we're providing to our customers, almost to the sense that there should be a rule for two-person integrity. Human and machine have to come to the table, and neither one can dominate the answer.
If I could just add to this, because this is going to sound weird for a second, but I think it also requires all of us to be vigilant on interfaces, not just human interfaces, but also machine-to-machine interfaces. And what I mean by that is that it's going to be too easy to create a very usable interface, which allows the analyst to assume definity that this is the answer, instead of showing them the ambiguity that the algorithms are actually showing to them. And that also is going to show up in API calls in between individual systems as we build more complex aggregate components. Because if my API sort of wipes that under the table, we're going to end up with false assumptions all the way down the line.
Yeah.
So,
really good point on interfaces. So this is a good question, actually. Somebody asked that I wanted to kind of direct to Christy. So they said, why are AI ML acquisition options focused on alternatives to existing contract paths, for example, OTAs, DI/UX, etc., and not options like adding innovation or AI topics onto all contracts to afford rapid targeted insertion?
That's a great idea.
I know.
Yes. Yes.
I think it's a big yes from all of us, but how do we do that? And maybe that's a takeaway question for some of us. This shouldn't be an offshoot. This should be the core.
But that's not an and.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be an and, not an or.
Right. Yeah.
So I think from a commercial standpoint, if you look at how Google has done this, I think it's a good reference point. So Google has embedded data scientists and machine learning experts in all of their teams and all of their products. It's not a silo that remains separate as an ivory tower. They've diversified it, and there are now data scientists that are on every single product manager's team figuring out how to embed that technology. So it's an add-on, not necessarily an adjunct.
I think that is the right solution, in fact, where it just becomes core to all the teams. There were several questions about GeoWorks, and so I thought I'd just quickly go through them, and then we have a quick announcement on it. So one person said, do you have any plans for providing GeoWorks to non-US companies? Yes. We're launching as an MVP, like you heard from Robert, with what we could, and that was with US persons to start, but over time we are going to open it up even wider, starting with allies, so think Five Eyes, and see how far we can open it up. And then another question, can anyone use GeoWorks tool you mentioned? Can I use it within my business? Can I train AI models on it? Yes, absolutely. I think that's the idea. You can't take the data with you, but you can take the model with you. You could take the data with you if you go to the next level, so we do credas and so forth together, and that would be a way to work with data in a different way. And then I thought we'd make a quick announcement on GeoWorks, so I'll kind of give it to Christy.
So actually, I have two announcements. First, yesterday when we launched, we had one challenge posted. Since we launched, we've added a second challenge. It's another SoftWorks challenge. I'm just going to read this. It provides the challenge is to provide the ability to collect sensor data in the field using mobile devices and standard communication protocols, which become critical in operations or disaster situations when networks may be degraded or unavailable. So this is going to be a 2-month challenge on the SOCOM Teamwork site. We're putting a link to, actually the link is up now on the GeoWorks, linking to that. There are fabulous cash prizes involved. The second announcement is that for new signups for GeoWorks, Robert has agreed, for everybody who's a new user to GeoWorks, Robert will per company, one company, be selected to go and have kind of some special quality time with Robert.
Yeah. So if you sign up today for GeoWorks, we're going to randomly choose one company, and then you'll have an opportunity to get a one-on-one with the director of NGA. So everybody should go sign up. And I think, like we said, GeoWorks was an MVP, and we said we were going to be updating it quickly. We updated it overnight. That's fast for government, and I think it goes to the rest of the conversation that we've been having. Government is trying to change here. We know we need to make some changes to get there, and we need to work with industry and everyone differently to do that. And so I just wanted to thank everyone on the panel kind of for representing their parts and for everything they do to support us, and thank everybody out there for everything that you do to support us in our mission. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's give everybody a groovy hand. Good start.